Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning. If you will, go ahead and turn over in your Bibles to 1 Timothy chapter 2. We're going to finish this chapter up real briefly this morning and move on into chapter 3. There were just a couple of verses last week that I didn't get to go over, and since this is a verse-by-verse study, I think it's important for us to not skip a verse. So we didn't even get to really read it or anything like that, so I wanted to spend just a little bit of time doing that this morning. Verses 13, 14, and 15, first of all. He says, "For it was Adam who was first created, and then Eve. And it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being deceived fell into transgression. But women will be preserved through the bearing of children if they continue in faith and love and sanctify with self-restraint." So this whole time he begins with women and the role of women, and specifically he's going to go into the role of elders and the role of deacons and just set in order things pertaining to the church. He begins with talking about women, and we've talked last week about the modesty of women, and here he sums up this little section right here, giving us two reasons why the woman is to be in subjection to man and to Christ and to God, and really just setting in order the things in which God has set in order. He says that God created man first and then woman. That's right from verse 13. And so that's just the order of things. You know, it's not like man decided that. Man had no part in that. Man was not there when God created him. But God decided to create man first. And so he put man in that position of creation. And it was established by God and not by society at all. And so Paul, this is not the only time that he addresses this. He confirms this idea back in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. If we'll go over there just real quickly and look at that, it helps us to set the stage for what he's explaining to us here as well. So 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 2 through 3, he says, "Now I praise you," verse 1, "be imitators of me as I am of Christ." He says, "I praise you because you remember me in everything and hold firmly to the traditions just as I delivered them to you. But I want you to understand that Christ is the head of every man, and the man is the head of a woman, and God is the head of Christ." And so he sets in order some things right here for us. In the spiritual body of Christ, the church, all things function according to that spiritual order of things, by the divine model that God has set up. Not the secular model or anything like that, but it's a divine order of things. The church is not like society or like government entities or anything like that, or like corporations. The church is different. It's a spiritual entity. And so it's organized along those spiritual lines where God, who is spirit and is spiritual, is the head of all things. And man and woman and Christ take that sub-role. Now, I'm not going to get into, I hinted right there to the idea of Christ being in subjection to God, and he is. There's many times that Jesus says, "Not my will, but yours," right? Even Jesus realizes that I'm going to follow what the whole Godhead says. That's another lesson for sure. But the idea is that even Christ is in subjection to God. Christ has his role as well. And when I say Christ, I'm not talking just about a third person of the Godhead. I'm talking about the Messiah, the Son of God, has his role that he's going to fulfill. In the same way that a man is going to fulfill his role. Or in the same way that a woman is going to fulfill her role. Every person gets into the position that they should be in accordance to what God has set up. Christ does what he's supposed to do. Man is supposed to do what he's supposed to do. And woman is supposed to do what she's supposed to do. Children are supposed to do what they're supposed to do. And everything in creation, it should do exactly what God designed it to do. The goat, just a good illustration. The goat doesn't really question whether he should be a goat or not, does he? He doesn't sit there and say, well, boy, I really wish I was a cat. He doesn't know what a cat is. The goat does what God intended for it to do. In every aspect of creation. A star doesn't say, boy, I wish I was a tree. Whatever it's created to do, it fulfills that role. And so Christ fulfills his role. Man is to fulfill his role, and woman is to fulfill her role, and children and elders and deacons, and every person's supposed to live up to the expectations that God has placed. And that's important for us to understand what he's saying here. Now let's go back over to our text in 1 Timothy. And this perfectly really just does set the stage for us as we get into the role of elders and deacons and other aspects of the order of things. He says, verse 14, that woman was the first one to have sinned. Eve was deceived into disobedience. Adam was not fooled. He was influenced by his wife, but Eve was the one that was first fooled by the devil, and so that set things in order. It's really I read a commentary. Usually what I do in the preparation of my lessons, I read the text, I dissect the words, I dissect the phrases, I look at the context, I prepare my lesson. Afterwards, I'll go and I may look at a commentary. That's me, okay? So with this one, I did. I don't always even do that. I feel like God has, given us the ability to study on our own and be able to. I don't need to be influenced by somebody else and then try to study the Scriptures. I want to study the Scriptures and then be influenced by perhaps what someone else has to say. So Dr. Denny Petrillo, who's the longtime president of Bear Valley Bible Institute, years ago wrote a commentary on 1st and 2nd Timothy, and I think I've mentioned it in this class as well. And so I turned to this one just to see what he had to say about this, and he did such a great job. I didn't bring it with me, but I think I can explain what he was saying in this commentary just briefly. I thought it was so interesting because he talked about how it was a woman, Eve, who first took the leadership position in sinning first. Okay? She took that lead role in picking that fruit, whatever it was, and eating it first, and then presenting it to her husband, which is this leadership role that she usurped over her man. Okay? And so that's the idea here, is that it was Eve that and that's what he's saying right here. Eve is the one that sinned first. She took this position over Adam and usurped his authority. Now we'd say, well, does he have authority to sin? Well, I wouldn't say authority to sin, but the natural inclination for man to sin is there. We are wicked people, and that is just who we are. And God has given man the ability to choose what is right and what is wrong. And Adam was not the one that first did this. Eve was. And with that, consequences came. Now, when all of them sinned, Adam and Eve sinned, and I would even say, I say all of them because I include the devil in this, because he's the one that lied and certainly is the father of lies and the father of sin. So the devil is in all this. He's the other character, right? The devil is. Which the whole idea of the devil or Satan, he's an accuser. He's a liar. He's a schemer. So the devil is involved in this, and then we've got God also who's involved in this, right? So we've got 4 characters involved in Genesis chapter 3. And all these beings or whatever, because I'm including the devil here, all 3 of these people sinned, right? All of them did. And all 3 of them got some kind of a punishment in some way or another. The devil, the serpent, if you will, in this event in history, was cursed to crawl on his belly, take in the dust of the earth the rest of his life, right? So that's one aspect of it. There's a beautiful prophecy there in this punishment that the devil has about how Christ, you will bruise his heel, but he will put a blow to your head. You may put Jesus on the cross, but that's not going to really kill him. He's going to rise up in 3 days. It's not a death blow. Okay, it's not the end of all. He died. He was buried. He was resurrected. There's still more to come. But he will destroy you. He'll give the devil the death blow. So that's part of the devil's punishment. Adam received punishment in that he is going to have to work by the sweat of his brow. He'll have to be somebody that works. God provided everything they needed in the garden, and they were to tend the garden. But now he's going to have to work for everything that he has. And we're still dealing with that curse today, aren't we? The devil's still dealing with his curse today, too. Adam is still dealing with, I'm having to work. Everybody in here is trying, having to still work, too. And Eve had a punishment as well. And the punishment for her was that she would deal with pains in childbirth. She'd have to deal with those kinds of pains in childbirth. It's a punishment. Trust me, I've seen that happen before, and it's hard to do. I don't want to do that. And if you've experienced that, that's hard to deal with. So that's part of that punishment. All comes back to Genesis chapter 3. Still to this day, every single person is dealing with the punishment or the consequences of their sin. Okay? Still to this day. It sets in order the things from the very beginning. So now let's go back to 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verses 14 through 15. He says, it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman being deceived first fell into transgression. And we know the rest of the story. We don't have to do that. His point is about women right here. He says, but women will be preserved through the bearing of children. You deal with the consequences. You face it. It's just something you're going to have to do. You bear through that if they continue in faith and love and sanctify with self-restraint. So, let me get to verse 15 and talk a little bit about that. So, she'll be saved through the bearing of children if they continue in faith and love and sanctification with self-restraint. And so this experience of birthing and raising children would be turned into a favorable one because of her ultimate salvation through that. If she continued in this universal life-giver role, and she did so with faith, love, and purity, and modesty, and good sense, she could survive childbearing and rearing and would also survive death to be raised up again along with her husband to eternal life when Jesus is returned. So the idea is that if she will fulfill her role, that's the idea behind that. So somebody will say, well, does that mean, excuse me, does that mean that only women who bear children will be saved? That's what some people may stretch through that. That is not what this is saying. The point is not about if you bear children or not. The point is are you fulfilling the role that God has given you? Whether you can bear children or not. Are you doing? If you fulfill the role, if you do what you're supposed to do, then you'll be saved. And that is universal. Man, he does what he's supposed to do, he'll be saved. Women, you do what you're supposed to do, you'll be saved. Children, elders, deacons, it sets in order the things. Everybody does what God designed them to do, and you'll be saved. And that's the idea behind that. What a beautiful statement. It really is. Okay, well, I wanted to finish that up and move right on into the next chapter. And I want us to remember, though, as we get into chapter 3, that there were no chapter breaks when Paul originally wrote this. So don't think of it, okay, now a whole new section. I think, and I've tried to allude to that already in this class, I think that this continues the thought of saying here's what women are supposed to do. Really, here's what men are supposed to do as well. Pray, for everybody, and pray, lifting up holy hands. Here's what women are supposed to do. And now he'll say, and here's what your leadership is supposed to do. And so that's the idea behind that. It's not a chapter break was not necessarily what Paul had in mind. It's just continuing that thought of everybody fulfilling the role that they're designed to do. Okay? Any questions or comments as we get into that? And I've got, this is on a new PowerPoint, so let me X out of this one and pull up a new one, okay? I've got it ready to go. Just need to pull it up. All right.
Could I bring out a point about Adam real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just heard a sermon about that this morning from the West Huntsville Church of Christ. I don't know if they have a app you can put on your phone. It's really good. But anyway, Adam did not do his job.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
And he sat back and a lot of men are shirking their responsibility.
Yeah.
And some of those men are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah, that's a great point.
We always hammer Eve to death.
Sure.
I mean, we do. And because, the reason,
Yeah.
But Adam also just...
Yeah, that's a great point. Gina, it's a good point. And I thought about that this week, and I didn't put it in the notes or anything like that. But I kept thinking about during the time of the judges, people were not stepping up the way that they should. And even at that time, there was a woman, Deborah, who stepped up to serve as a judge. And if you remember months ago, I taught a class on the judges. And you have to remember, it's not like the judges as if you see today in black robes and the gavel or anything like that. These are more like army commanders is who they are. She's stepping up to lead an army is what she's done, and those other judges were doing as well. But when men, Adam, doesn't step up to do his role, and being the spiritual leader, eventually somebody else is going to do it. And in this case, there were two people on the face of the planet. Somebody else stood up, and she got it wrong this time. She got it wrong. And she gave in to the devil when he tempted her with that little bit of power because Adam was not leading the way he should have led. Now, that's very presumptuous. I wasn't there in the garden. I don't know about you were, anything like that. But
and we always got to remember, now, Adam and Eve had their choice.
Sure.
For what we got, we aren't exactly to blame them because we got a choice not to sin also.
Yeah, that's right.
And we choose to sin.
Yeah, we do.
So, we're walking in the same footsteps.
Yeah, that's right.
So.
That's exactly right. But this, what's that?
Just another era.
Yeah, that's right. And that's an issue that we're dealing with today in the Lord's church is men not stepping up to do the leadership that they should. I can't remember who it was. Oh, I think it was your mother, Drew, posted a picture from, I think like the 60s of these deacons at some church this week. And I saw all these deacons lined up. And I don't know, there was 6 or 8 of them. And all these deacons, I know it's a cultural thing, but all these deacons were wearing suits is what I noticed. And I remember growing up, and men wore suits. Now listen, I wear a suit just because I think I look amazing in a suit. You could wear a suit or not wear a suit. It doesn't make any difference to me. But there is a mindset that these men are going to take that job as deacons very, very serious. Okay? That's the mindset. And I'm hoping and praying that our deacons today at North Heights or wherever all over the world are stepping up, realizing the position and the work that they have. In the same way, I'm hoping and I'm praying that elders are looking at this situation and saying we're going to be stepping up into that role and taking it as serious as we've ever taken anything serious at all. So that's the idea. It doesn't matter a suit or not a suit, but I think that if we, as soon as we don't take it serious, somebody else will step up into that role and take it serious. They will. And they'll probably get it wrong. Why? Because somebody's not fulfilling the role in which God has ordained to take. And that's a dangerous road for us to go down. A dangerous road. All right?
We're talking about the roles of men and women in the home, that is super hard.
Oh, sure it
And like
is.
and it was talking about if the woman is doing roles that are really not designed for her, she's not doing them as well as what she was, if she was designed for a certain thing, God expects her to do that certain thing, and
Yeah.
she'll do very well and excel at that.
Yes, that's right.
And same with a man taking over a woman's, whatever it is,
Yeah.
is not equipped to do as well.
And we're not talking about washing dishes or cooking, are we?
No.
No, we're talking about spiritual leadership, right? We're talking about things that are spiritual. That's a very important thing to think about. Okay, now, with that in mind, everybody going to fulfill their role the way they should. Let's talk about the role, the work, and the qualifications of elders as found in 1 Timothy chapter 3.
Hey, Alex.
Yes, sir.
I've got one other thing I'd like to bring up because it's hit me pretty hard in the last few years. And whether you're a man or a woman, God has a job for us to do regardless. Mm-hmm. And an important thing for us to remember as our bodies change and our life change and we get older, then sometimes He's going to expect us to do something different,
Sure.
have a different job for us to do than what we've always done.
Sure.
I mean, the younger men are normally your deacons, and your older men are your elders.
Sure.
Well, those deacons should, somewhere along the line, become mature enough to become elders.
Yeah.
So, men, for whatever the Lord has planned for them to do, to keep growing in it, regardless of what happens in their life, to keep growing,
Sure.
going on, because God, if we do the same thing forever, we're going to get stagnant.
Sure. Yeah. Good point. Very good point. All right, let's read verses 1 through 7 this morning. Chapter 3, 1 Timothy. It is a trustworthy statement. If any man aspires to the office of overseer, it is a fine work he desires to do. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, prudent, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to wine, nor pugnacious, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of the church of God? And not a new convert, so that he will not become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. He must have a good reputation with those outside the church, so that he will not fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Okay, so as the title of this section suggests, this lesson will briefly kind of go over what type of men should have this important responsibility of church leadership. Every time that I look at these qualifications and read through this text, I have my grandfather in mind, because the role of an elder was personified in my grandfather. And I saw the heartache, and I saw the stress, and I saw the joy and the reward that he had fulfilling that role. It is the most difficult of roles to fill, I think, on the face of the planet. And so we can see that in this description of what kind of a man this is. It's been rumored, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's been rumored that James Garfield served as a president of the United States for a brief time, but he was also a part of the Churches of Christ, or the Disciples of Christ. At that time in history, it was the same thing. They had the same name. It didn't make any difference. And it's been rumored that he served as an elder in the church, and that when he became and was elected president, he stepped down out of that role as an elder. And he said this, and I don't know if this is true or not. It's a good quote if it is. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It really makes a good point. He is rumored to have said that he steps down the eldership out of the most important, most prestigious role on the face of the planet to serve as President of the United States. And that really says something to me, the way that a man could view this role as an elder is more prestigious and more important than serving as the leader of the free world. That's impressive to me. So you think about men who serve in that capacity, and we are blessed with 8 fantastic good elders here at North Heights. Men that teach me, that shepherd me, that help me through difficult times, correct me, love me. Oh man, I've never served with the group of men that we have here. I've never served with anybody like that before. It really, and I've sung their praises from day one, and I'm not just saying that because if I didn't like it, you would know it. If it wasn't really that way, you could tell it. But these men that I serve with, as them being my shepherd, my overseer, my elders, my bishops, my pastors, those are all good words, and we'll talk about that. They're fantastic. And let me tell you, I don't say this lightly, not every church is blessed with as good of elders that we have here at North Heights. I mean that. I've seen it. I hear things. All of us preachers, we talk and we communicate. And there are things that churches are going through, especially right now, that we are not having to go through. And it's because we have good leadership. Leadership reflects into your church. And we're a growing church. And it's because of the leadership that we have. So I say that. Now let's read what these men are supposed to do. All right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the role and the work. It's kind of the same thing. It's hard to describe exactly. He begins by commending those who seek leadership roles in the church. To have this desire is good, he says, and the position itself is a good thing to want. Okay? So it's a good thing. So that's important to see here. I want to make sure, I don't know if there we go. It's a good thing. This work is a good thing, and it's a good thing to want. The work is rewarding, first of all. It's difficult, and I think they can all attest to that. Like I said, very, very difficult. But at the same time, it is so wonderful and so rewarding. I'm sure there are days where you pull your hair out. I'm sure there are days where the stress and the turmoil is difficult. But I also know, I've seen it on our elders' faces, days where they are just elated because of the spiritual maturity or the growth that this body here at North Heights is experiencing. And that's amazing to see. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to want. Any man, we should be training our men from day one to aspire to be an elder in the church. We really should. Not all of them will be able to. Not all of them will want to. But we should be at least trying. And really, all of us should be trying to do some, at least not all, or at least not, maybe some of all of them, if it applies to you. Striving to meet those qualifications that are listed right here. This is something that we all should try to do. Okay? It's not like it's a list for only these elite men, but really all of us should try to do these things and be this kind of a person. Paul's going to address more about the qualifications later on in the book of Titus. So I'm not going to go there, but I just want to stay within this text for sure. So that's kind of important to think about. It's something that he aspires to do. I got to make sure I may just pull this up. Yeah, there we go. We'll just do all that. There may be one more. Let's just see. Yeah, there we go. Good. So the word here, it's a trustworthy saying. If a man aspires to the office of overseer, an overseer is the word here is bishop. Guardian is another way of looking at it. But the word can, in other passages, could be described as an elder, a presbyter. You should really go up to Mark Skelton later on and say, "Thank you for being such a great presbyter." We don't use that terminology very often. But you probably heard of the Presbyterian Church, haven't you? Yeah, that they get that idea because they're governed by elders. Not in the most biblical sense, I will say that. They usually will have a group of presbyters who will be over a large a congregation, and then another congregation, and then another congregation. So it's a group of elders over many congregations. But that's not what the Scriptures teach. The Scriptures teach us that each individual congregation has set up elders or presbyters, and that you are autonomous to that congregation. So the elders here don't dictate what other churches do or anything like that. They're just over this church, this congregation of the Lord's people. That's what the Scriptures teach us. That's what we see as given the example. Another word is a shepherd. I love this word. We've adopted this word a lot here in our church. We've adopted that word because it really describes what they do. They shepherd. That's the work that's involved. It's so much. I'm not going to say it's a better word, but it is a good word to describe what they do. The word is also pastor. That's shepherd. The idea of looking over a flock. That's the idea of a pastor. Today's culture uses the word pastor to mean preacher. And so they'll say, "Oh, Alex, where do you pastor?" Well, I don't in the sense of being a shepherd. But if you're talking about me, where do I preach? Well, I preach at North Heights. So I don't want to be called pastor. That's not the role that I fulfill. I'm not a shepherd. I don't meet the qualifications that are listed right here in this passage and other passages as well, especially when you get to the older part, okay? I'm not there for sure. Of course, at the time, let's think about this for just a moment. At the time, what's the life expectancy during the first century? I wonder, what is the life expectancy during the first century? Well, most people would say maybe 50, maybe 60 years old. And so when you look at elders at that time, they are men that may have been in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And that's young to us still. In our culture, we have the life expectancy, I think it's 76 now, maybe 78, I don't know. And so when we look at elders, we look at them usually being men that are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s even, you know. We look at it from that perspective. So that's relative. Older, that's all relative to your culture, to life in general.
Isn't it the Mormons that they got little teeny bopper boys?
Sure, yeah.
They got elders slapped on their...
Yeah, I can't understand that one. I've asked them about that, and I cannot figure that one out. Yeah, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints certainly do put the word title elder on their young men. I can't figure that one out. Yeah, they probably are. Well, I tell you, usually I think it's 18 years old when you graduate. They'll send you off on what they call the mission, and you'll go and preach and teach and try to convert people, and they'll label you as an elder and door knock. You've seen the guys with the white shirts, black ties, you know.
I'd love to get one in a study.
Oh, I have. I've studied with them, and it's difficult. It's difficult. Yes, very much so. All right, so there are, like I said, there's these three Greek words. I didn't even talk about this. Episkopos is one of them right here, which is the overseer. That's the word that's used right here. You probably heard of the Episcopalian Church. That's another one. Okay, same idea right there. Episkopos is the bishop, the overseer. Another word is superintendent. That's another, I didn't even mention that at all. It suggests authority, and they do have that. Authority to lead, oversee, supervise, guard, found right here in verse 1. In Acts 20:28, this word is used as well when Paul is leaving churches, and they talk about being elders or being episkopos over people, an overseer who's God has made you overseers. 1 Peter chapter 2 verse 25 uses this term in reference to Jesus. He is the guardian of our souls, the episkopos of our souls. Philippians 1 and verse 1, Paul demonstrates that this role of overseer or bishop was a specific office in the church and not simply a leadership quality of certain men in the congregation. He says, to all the saints in Jesus Christ who are in Philippi, including the overseers and deacons. Okay, so not just everybody there, but including those overseers and deacons. The next word is elder, or like I said, presbyteros is the actual Greek term right there. This is a good one. The Gentiles used this same word, presbyteros, to describe the position within a local government or city. They would call the city elders, call the elders of a town to come out. They'll call the presbyteros. And then shepherd and pastor, it's the Greek word piomen, and really describes, like I said, the work in which they do. Okay? Just make sure I'm covering everything I want to. They're mature men. I think we understand that. He says, Acts 20:28, be on guard. Yeah, this is a good point. Everybody go over to Acts chapter 20, because all three of these words are used. I wanted to make sure you saw this. Acts chapter 20, starting in verse 17, Paul says, from Maltus he sent to Ephesus and called to him the elders of the church. Okay, that's verse 17. Okay, then there's all this dialogue, and we understand what Paul is saying here. But let's skip on down to verse 28. He says here, let's see. Be on guard. Okay, what is our word for guard right here? Is this word bishop, overseer. Okay. Be on guard for yourselves and for all the flock among the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. And here it is, to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. So you have, in this same context, Acts chapter 20, him calling the elders, one word. Then he calls, and this is not in the order in which it's here on the screen. So he calls the elders, that's one word. He talks about them overseeing, guarding, that's another word. And then he talks about them shepherding. It's a totally different word. The same thing, all the same person. That's why we're able to use this term for the one position that's mentioned right there. Isn't that beautiful? I like that. That's a good point to make. Okay? Let's see here. Let's talk a little bit about the qualifications of these elders. Paul begins with positive attributes, positive ones. The overseer then must be, first of all, he says, above reproach. Above reproach. Now, this does not mean that this man is without sin. No, it doesn't mean that. But rather who is made right to the very best of his abilities. The things that are wrong in his life, he tries to correct so that those matters cannot be charged against him and held against him. He tries to work on his life. So that's one aspect of it. He is above reproach. He now lives in such a way that he will not cause shame on himself nor shame on the church. Okay? I want you to think about that. Oh, man. This makes us feel guilty. I hope it does. Makes me feel guilty. I don't want to bring shame on myself, for sure. And I don't want to bring shame upon the church. Do we work in our lives to try not to bring shame upon the church? When you make decisions, are you thinking, well, how will this affect the church? How will this affect that teenager who's just now became a Christian? You know? How will this affect them? If I've decided to do something in my life that is not good, what will that young teenager think? You know? Or that fourth grader who's just now learning some of the stories that we put to heart, how will they react to the choices that I've made in my life? That's a powerful thing to think about, isn't it? Okay, so we looked at the younger ones. How will that blue-haired old lady that sits on the front pew with her shawl and her, back support in the pew, how will she respond if I react and I do these things? An elder works to think how his actions, his words, his thoughts not only influence himself, but influence others. I got a long way to go. Me, Alex does. I got a long way to go to be above reproach. Any questions or comments? Anything at all?
You don't know who's watching.
Yeah.
It doesn't, and sometimes it's years later that you realize somebody makes a comment and they were watching what you're doing. I'm talking from personal experience.
Sure.
Somebody was watching and you weren't thinking anything of it.
Yeah.
You were just trying to do what the Lord would have you to do, or you messed up big time.
Sure.
And somebody's been watching. Well, if he did that, well, that'd be all right for me to do too.
Yeah.
It can go positive or negative, but
It sure can.
there's so many people that are watching that we don't even stop to realize.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. Anything else? Got a few minutes here.
Hey, Alex,
Yes, sir.
there's a book. Glenn Colley wrote Awake at Night. It's 100 Tough Problems Church Elders Have Faced. It's a very good book.
Oh, yeah. 100 what? I didn't hear the...
It's 100 tough problems church elders have faced.
100 tough problems that church elders have
The
faced.
book is Awake at Night.
Awake at Night. A good book.
Very good.
Have you ever heard of Jimmy Young that preached? He used to preach at Nettleton in Jonesboro.
I don't know Jimmy Young.
Somebody said, well, Jimmy, you need to be an elder. He said, I'd be awake all night.
Yeah, I'd be awake all
He
night.
said, he said, I wouldn't sleep at night. And
Yeah.
because it's such a heavy responsibility.
Huge
The
responsibility.
souls of all those
Yeah.
people God's entrusted to.
Yeah.
So,
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. But we want new elders. See, so you don't want to scare them off. You want to train young men to step into that role.
He's a preacher. I mean, he does a real good job at that. He just doesn't feel like he do that.
Well, let's actually stop right here. We've just barely scratched the surface of the qualifications. I don't want to jump into a new one. We've got about 20 seconds left before the bell rings, so it's not worth trying to get into the next one. But we're going to go through each one of these. We'll probably cover quite a bit. Finish this section up about elders next week and then talk about deacons as well. Thank you so much for being here this morning. I love every one of you.